for now, I'd love to bring up James onto the stage. James is coming to us from Tennessee, so that's really exciting. And he's going to be talking to us about static sites, and he's kind of like a big deal. If you guys look on him on Twitter, like he's got videos everywhere, so you can learn about all the things from James. So, no pressure, James, but really looking forward to having you come on board. So thank you, CascadiaJS, for having us on. See you later.
Absolutely. What a fun intro. A big deal. I wish I could get that in writing somewhere for me to keep with me as a tagline as I go forward. But anyway, glad to be here. Really excited in this time to be able to do these virtual meetups. I think they've actually gone really well for the ones that I've done in the past. So it's been a lot of fun. So I am excited to be here and do this one again. So first off, I want to kick this off by just kind of starting with something that may not be obvious, and it's the fact that static sites doesn't really equal static sites, at least probably not in the way that you think. So when you hear the word static site, you might think of something like this. It's just a basic HTML page. You've got like a header tag and a paragraph tag, or maybe you get something a little bit fancier and it's got like links and a little like mouse icon on it, but still pretty basic. Maybe you even get super fancy and you've got this really cool pink blog layout with like a sidebar and different things going on. Or maybe you get the ultimate in cool and you get the Space Jam website from the late 90s, which is still out there, and you can go and check it out if you want to. Also notice the Space Jam poster in the back here. Big part of my childhood. But regardless of what you think, when you hear the phrase static sites, it's important to know, and what I want to show you is just how far the web has come, how much web applications have changed in the last 20 years, the last 15 years, the last 10 years, the last couple of years has really just been an exponential thing. So welcome to this talk where hopefully I can show you just how dynamic your static sites can be when you learn how to use them with serverless functions. Now, I would love to have everyone go and follow me on Twitter, but that's only part of the reason that I show this slide. This is actually part of the demo, and this is going to be 8 of the 15 minutes or so is going to be the demo. So if you can participate, people that are watching out there, if you can tweet something that includes the hashtag JQQuickTalks, and then also tag me in it at JamesQQuick on Twitter, if you're on Twitter. That's going to be part of the demo. So usually when I'm in person, I like bully people and stare them down and make them go do this. So somebody out there, I need at least one person for this part to work, to participate and tweet something. Hopefully you'll do that for me. So this is a quick presentation. Most of it's going to be demo, but really quickly, when we define what static sites are, I've usually got some extra background, but to me, the simple definition of a static site is basically just a collection of static assets that are served from a server or a CDN. And what this means is, as a user, when you make a request to a website, instead of there being like a dynamic real-time generation of HTML where you go and interact with a database and send that web page back, all of that stuff is already there and it just gets sent directly to the browser without any real-time compilation or dynamic generation of that HTML. So how do you make static sites? Well, you probably see like your basic vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Think back to that like Space Jam website that we saw a second ago. You could also use a front-end framework like Angular, React, or Vue. And this is maybe a little controversial for people because obviously these frameworks allow you to build very dynamic websites. But they each have their own build process. And when you deploy one of those, you run through that build process and you get a set of dist files, your built assets, and you host those on a server, hopefully in a CDN, content delivery network, where those things get replicated across the world and it's really fast and you get all the benefits of static sites. So you can do both of those options, but what if you have like a ton of pages? Let's say you're doing a blog. This is the stereotypical example that people look at. And if you're doing a blog, you probably don't want to create individual HTML pages yourself, right? So instead of doing that for hundreds of blog posts or whatever it is that you're working on, you can use something like a static site generator. And I won't go into details about those, but these are basically frameworks to help generate static sites. And so they have that build process where they go and grab information from a data source. They use that information to build pages, for example, blog pages. And then at the end of that build process, those assets just sit somewhere statically and get served down to the user. So that's all the background I want to talk about just in general. Now let's get into the demo. And what this is I wanted this to be a site where I can track all of the talks that I give. And I wanted a couple of features or requirements with this site. So with that, I wanted to have a site that's easily hosted. This is a big aspect of the Jamstack, JavaScript APIs and markup, is you can easily host a site. So I wanted easy hosting. I wanted static pages for talks to be super fast, super secure. I wanted interactive feedback. This is something that speakers rarely actually get. A lot of people come to a talk, they listen, they leave, or they say good job and they walk out. Rarely do you actually get constructive feedback. So I wanted to kind of advocate that I would love to get some feedback on talks. I would like to also get alerted when a new piece of feedback comes in. How can I know that feedback got here? And then I wanted a site that's really secure. So again, like speed, easy hosting, secure. This is all kind of the realm of static sites and Jamstacks and that sort of stuff. So the technologies that I decided to use for this, Gatsby is a static site generator, but much more actually than just that. It can do static site generation, and you'll actually see some of that here in a minute. But Gatsby as using it as a static site generator, and it's a framework built on React. And so inside of here, you can do things like get a list of talks that I've given in JavaScript, sort those, and then iterate through each one and create a page based on that. All right. And then we need somewhere to actually store this data. And this is not really your traditional database. It's more going to be a generic data source. What I'm using is actually Trello. So for Trello or with Trello, I'm going to store all of the talks that I give as Trello cards if people have used Trello before. If not, go check it out. I use it every day for my to-do items and backlog and things. So I'm going to store the talks inside of Trello. And then with each talk, I'll store all of the comments that come along with it or the feedback comments that come. So a little code snippet here in serverless functions. I can use the Trello npm package and just call add card for each comment that comes in. I just call add card and give it the content and it creates the card in Trello, which is pretty cool. Now, I mentioned that I also wanted to be alerted. So if someone adds a piece of feedback to a talk, I wanted to notify myself. So I jumped for Twilio. I am a Twilio champion, so I love kind of sharing with people the coolness of Twilio. But with Twilio, you can send email and text messages. And so for myself, I decided when a new piece of feedback comes in, I would save that to the Trello card and then also go ahead and send a message to myself with this little code snippet here. And then I was looking for other dynamic things to do. And this is kind of going back to why I was so adamant about Twitter, is I wanted to work with the Twitter API. And so what I'm doing is I'm searching for recent tweets based on a hashtag. Think back to that hashtag JQQuick talks that I asked people to, hopefully someone has done, but tweet about. And that will be part of this demo to show you how you can do truly dynamic things inside of your static site. So a little code snippet here. After you get a Twitter client and you give it all the credentials and things that you need, you call a get, you tell it to search for tweets, and you tell it which hashtag to search for. Hopefully we'll see some of that stuff show up. And then lastly, I wanted this thing to be really secure. So I'm using Auth0 as an application security layer to do not only authentication, allowing me to log in, but I'm also using authorization, getting into JSON web tokens and permissions and things on the back end to make sure that no one else can get into this application and add talks unless I specifically assign them a given role, which I've only given myself up until now. So with the Auth0 library and React or using in Gatsby here, you just get some basic information about the user, whether they're logged in, a login function, a log out function, and you use those things like you would in a typical React application to hide and show data or routes or protected routes or any of the things that you want. And I think I said lastly, but I've got one more here. All of this is going to be hosted inside of Netlify, including the site as well as the serverless functions. And this is, I wish we had a longer time for me to really dive into how serverless functions work and how amazing they are. What you really need to know is all you do is create a file and you include that in your source code. Here's the add feedback function. So if somebody submits a piece of feedback, it runs through this file. It's one file out of a couple that's included in a functions directory. And I tell Netlify where my serverless functions live, and they do the rest and they host it for me. And inside of the Netlify dashboard, you can see a list of the serverless functions that I have set up here. So one for adding feedback, one for adding a talk, and one for searching those tweets that hopefully we'll see show up in the demo here. So for anybody that's curious, the source code is on my GitHub page, and you can either go to the demo link that I'll show you in a second to get the talk details, or on my site, On my speaking page, you can go and find details for the slides too. So you can definitely go and grab that. But here's the link to the source code if you want it. So all of that said, I'm going to slide over to a new tab, and I've got this site. What's the best way for me? Not that one. I think it's Control and Zoom. There we go. So talktrack.netlify.app. Everyone can go and visit this now. And actually, I would encourage you to, because I would appreciate some people being there to be a part of the demo. And on here, you can see a list of the talks that I've given. It's actually this talk that I've given several times, and I've had different amount of time to give this talk. This is the shortest time I've done it. But inside of one of these, you can see the details about the talk. You can see the date. You can see what event it was at. You can see the description. And we've got a question in the chat. Just want to try to get that out for people. Talktrack.netlify.app. So people can go and hopefully visit and participate in this demo. So you can see all the details about this talk over here, as well as I mentioned I wanted to have the ability to get interactive feedback from users. Well, there's a rating system here. A little quick rating thing that I built where you can give me a rating. You can add some feedback, which I would greatly appreciate. I would appreciate if you did it just for like testing purposes, but for real feedback after, that would be great too. So I'm not going to give away too much. Let me go back home and let me show you really quick. Inside of Trello, I have all the cards that represent each talk. So if I click on, this is the one I gave at CascadiaJS, and I scroll down, I see the information about that talk, as well as the different pieces of feedback, which is really, really cool in my mind. So I'm going to do something a little dangerous. In a live presentation, very rarely do you turn your phone on loud. Usually it's quite the opposite, but I want this to hopefully kind of come into the audio. We'll see how loud it is for you, but hopefully you'll be able to hear it. So what I'm going to do is go in to add a talk, and this is going to be my static sites and serverless functions talk. This is the CascadiaJS Meetup. It is 07/15/2020. My slides, I've got IntelliSense here for that. And the description, this is the superest, coolest talk I've ever seen. And I'll go ahead and submit. Now, notice I am logged in. You won't be able to log in because you don't have an account. You could probably create an account, but you won't have a role to then be able to add a talk. So it is secured. But if you remember back, we talked a little bit about these being static sites, right? So static sites go through this build process where at build time, they go and grab all the information they need to then build the static pages. Each one of these pages is a static page. And so at this point, you notice like if I come back to the homepage and I refresh, I don't see that latest talk, right? I still see the stuff that I already saw before. I don't see the new one. But what's cool is inside of my serverless function, when I add a talk, I'm here in Netlify now. If I scroll down to my deploys, I think it may have already built, which is super fast. No, it's building. There we go. So what happens is when I submit a talk inside of that serverless function, I call a build hook inside of Netlify. And what that will do is trigger this application to build, again, going through that build process where it reaches out to grab the information from those Trello cards. And actually, just so you can see, that information is there. If I scroll down, you can see there's a new card here. So that's the card for the talk that I'm giving now. And this is going through a build process. When this is done, it says site is live. What we should see is if we refresh and people out there refresh too, now we've got this new talk on the website. And now this is where I would encourage and ask that you go to talktrack.netlify.app. Check out the information that's there. Leave a review. If we're lucky, what should happen is we should hear a little ding if people send this in the right time span. And we should hear that on the phone for the actual text message alert coming to me, letting me know that there was feedback given. The other thing, while hopefully we're waiting on a little ding here, actually I'm getting them, but for some reason it's not coming out through my audio. Let me see if my audio is all the way up. I think it is. I can hear just so we don't think I'm lying, and I'm not cheating on this. I don't know if we'll be able to if you'll be able to see that or not. It's very quiet. I don't know why it's so quiet, but the text messages are coming through, so people are participating. Thank you, everyone. And the last part of this, in terms of participation, now I'm hearing lots of them coming through. Awesome, thank you. If you scroll down, you can now see the tweets. So this is making on a static page built with Gatsby. When it loads, it's got certain pieces of information, like the stuff up top. But if you scroll down, what it's doing is it's also making a real-time call to the serverless function to ask for all of these recent tweets. So you can see, first of all, thank you for everyone for sending in these tweets, but you can see all these tweets are now dynamically being displayed on a static page, which I think is pretty cool for me. Like I've had a lot of fun with this demo, and I think it shows a lot of different aspects of static sites and Jamstack and static site generators that hopefully people hadn't thought of yet, and maybe you're kind of opening your mind to what's possible. So that's the demo. You can, like I said, go and grab all of the source code. You can check out everything that you want to, all the behind the scenes things that are going on. You can grab all of that. And thank you, everyone, for being here. If you have any like later on questions, you can find me on Twitter or any social media at JamesQQuick. You can also find information on jamesqquick.com. And anything you need, just feel free to reach out, and I will be here. I think we've got a Q&A session coming up, and then I think we've got like the after hour after that. So thanks again for everybody that's here. I appreciate you coming.
Hey, everybody. What's going on?
Nice,
James. Thanks, man. I had to atone for the technical glitches before, so I just whipped up a bunch of like hardcore like ML AI CGI stuff. It was really no big deal.
Right on the spot, yeah.
I mean, yeah. Well, and people might think I'm using something like Snapcam, but I assure you, I wrote this using TensorFlow myself. So. Anyway, no, James, I know you were busy giving an insane whirlwind talk, so you probably didn't notice the explosion of props in Slack. This talk was just amazing. As someone who's given technical talks at conferences, like it's so amazing when you're not just sort of talking about technology, but you're really showing people like how stuff works live. And I know that's it's kind of like walking a tightrope. And I'm glad that the demo gods were kind to you. But huge congratulations, everyone in Slack. Use the clap emoji. This is something that we're gonna figure out for Cascadia. We want to kind of bring that the appreciation back to you. But you did a great job. In fact, people were so blown away by your talk that I don't think that they really had the presence of mind to ask too many questions. But luckily, like I have questions. I have so many questions.
Awesome.
So the first question is like, as someone with a beard, right? Someone who's been in this industry for a really, really long time. I think I should probably hold on. Let me turn off TensorFlow. Okay, great.
Yeah, that custom algorithm that you wrote.
That's right. As someone who's been in this industry for a really long time, like the knee-jerk reaction to everything that you showed is like, congratulations, James. Like you just showed us a radically different way to like build web apps or build websites, as opposed to like how people have been building websites and web applications for decades. So I'm thinking of someone who is a PHP developer or Rails developer, or even a node.js developer, using things like frameworks like Express or Happy, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so I'm not trying to put you in sort of a false position of saying one is right or one is wrong, but I'm just curious. I mean, like from your perspective, like what are the benefits that you get out of building that kind of application, like in that style, right? Like what are you getting out of doing that as opposed to just, doing good old server side rendered stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the epitome of like what you get into more details when you have more time, right? So I'm glad you asked the question to elaborate a little bit here. So there's several things that come along with like static sites and the idea of Jamstack. One, the thing that people will probably jump for most is speed, right? The idea that like there's no real-time generation of pages. There's no database calls that happen real time. All of that stuff, or most of that stuff, happens at build time. So after your build process is done, you're just sitting there with HTML pages that you just send people directly. So that is very fast. You also, in this case, I'm not maintaining a server. So I am actually using serverless functions. Netlify has taken care of all of that stuff for me. So from a deployment process and a DevOps and a continuous integration, and from just a development experience, literally all I do is check in code and push it to master. And that's it. Like that's all I have to do because it's easily hosted. So inside of Netlify, it's got the source code for my site as well as the serverless function. So I don't have to go somewhere else to find where to host a Node application or PHP or Rails or whatever it is. And that, like, for me as a developer, if I'm working especially on like a side project, I can use the free tier Netlify and I've got a full stack application and I never have to worry about server updates or patches or any of that stuff, right? The stuff's just there and it just works. So all I do is write code and it's out there. So in that sense, there's like easy to host, there's cheaper, right? There's the optimizations that come along with serverless functions. I'm not having to pay for a server that's not running. I only pay for, in theory, if I hit a scale for the time that these serverless functions are actually being running. And then they're very secure, right? You hear about how many WordPress hacks and things there are. Yeah. It's because those are so popular. People are targeting those. And there are vulnerabilities that are out there. This is just sending files, right? There's not really a middle place to get in. It's just sending files back. So fast, secure, cheap. And from a development experience perspective, for me, it's just been great. So those are kind of the big ones that I go for.
Okay. Awesome. Hey, look, that I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think it helps kind of frame people's minds about like what the trade-offs are. And I think especially the point about DevX. I mean, if you're working on a large enough team, especially a team that might have, like people who are front-end engineers and people versus people who are back-end engineers, putting more of the power in the hands of the front-end devs to call certain APIs and kind of create richer interfaces. Like that's something that can really matter for larger organizations or just people working on those kinds of teams. Sure. You brought up something about the magic of serverless and I think, serverless is kind of a buzzword and, people like to make jokes about like, yeah, there is a server. It's not serverless, right? But I mean, it doesn't, I think serverless has been around for a while. Lambda kind of kicked it off, but Netlify's got functions, Twilio's got functions. I mean, everybody's got functions, right? I'm just curious, like, in your personal experience using serverless functions, like, have you run into any gotchas or any, I'm thinking of like the things like, oh, there's a cold start or like, oh, like I ran out of RAM, like in my serverless function because some of the server side code I was writing was doing some pretty intense stuff. Like, I'm just curious if you've run into any issues or for the most part, maybe you haven't, maybe this stuff you're doing is like, it sort of fits into that serverless world.
Yeah, sure. So I haven't, but we also have to keep in mind that like I'm not out here demoing scaled applications that hundreds and thousands and millions of users are using.
Hey, so James, there are a lot of people on this live stream. All right?
Yes, there were. I don't know if we hit 100,000, but it's probably close. So like my perspective in that sense is a little bit skewed, right? But there are, I think you raised perfect questions, right? Like memory size, and then the other one. You mentioned, sorry, what was the first one before memory size?
Or like your compute or something, like you've got some code that's trying to, do the Fibonacci, large Fibonacci sequence or something, right? So, I mean, it's like CPU intensity, like memory size, or just like really long running processes, like sometimes serverless functions have like a time, cold start. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like
it's like, sorry. Yeah, so cold start is definitely one of those things. Like, I think it depends on your needs in terms of performance. Like when I was at FedEx, we had an application that was really critical to have like 50 millisecond response time. That's not the kind of thing that we would look for serverless functions, right? Just because you get into that cold start and it might take a lot longer. And for us, that was like diverting packages. And if a package doesn't get diverted at FedEx, it goes round and round on a belt, right? So that's super, super important. So I think that it depends on the application. I think for the most part, most applications or a lot of applications can deal with that cold start. In terms of serverless functions and like scalability, it's one of the beautiful things about it is kind of like behind the scenes, the scaling can really go on without me having to manage it, and they can scale to support a pretty big load. I don't have like specific numbers to throw out, but that's kind of the idea of these like really micro things, and getting into the idea of like microservices as well, is they can like spin up and spin down independently and in theory just kind of like scale up to whatever loads you have. But again, like I'm definitely coming from the perspective of like I give a cool wowing demo and I'm not actually building like the real world applications that some people might have questions about. But I think like it's worth a look, right? To see if things work out for you, to see what your specific requirements are. And if this seems interesting enough and there's benefit enough to look into it more, then like prove yourself wrong. Like go down that path until you find something that you can't do, and then you can go to something that you're more used to.
Awesome. It totally makes sense. I was kind of curious. I noticed that you used Gatsby to sort of build your static client more or less. Like I'm just curious, like why did you choose Gatsby? Why not just like write it raw React, or why not use something like Next? I'm sure these are all things you could have used. I'm just curious, like what drew you to Gatsby?
Yeah, it's for me. So this, a lot of what I'm doing in here is pretty spot on with what my personal site does. It uses Gatsby, has I think just one serverless function that I'm using now for contacts and stuff. But I've been in the React space for maybe only like 2 years, maybe not that long, but that's been where I've spent most of my time in building front end sites. And I wanted, actually originally just kind of interested in all the hype, right? Like people were talking about static sites. They were talking about the benefits that I've kind of listed off now. And I was just like, oh, I might as well give it a shot. And I heard a lot of people talking about Gatsby. It was blowing up on Twitter. I gave it a shot and I really enjoyed it. And specifically one of the things I enjoy most is, I guess, two things. The community, one, the people are really active and there's lots of conversations and stuff going on. And then two, there seems to be a plugin for everything. If you look at like the Gatsby plugins, you can find one for almost anything you want to do. So that just makes the development process that much easier. But yeah, Next.js is one that I've looked in recently. The idea of like really marrying up and having full control over static sites and server-side rendered sites, I think that's pretty cool and really interesting. So I've been looking into that more. But for the time being, I've definitely really enjoyed the stuff I've done with Gatsby so far.
Nice, awesome. Well, look, I think we'll sort of wrap up the Q&A with that. James, I just want to really thank you for kind of coming out, and I remember I reached out to you and I kind of checked to see if you'd be interested in speaking to this meetup, and you got back to me super fast, and I just really appreciate it. I mean, that talk that was an eye-opening talk. I can feel like the people that are like sort of making the mental note to go check out a bunch of these technologies, and I think that's sort of what you aspire to as a speaker, right? I mean, you're clearly excited about what these technologies can do, and I feel like your purpose in giving the talk is to sort of share that excitement with other people, and that's definitely the feedback we've gotten so far. So just thanks a lot. Thank you so much for coming out.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
All right, later, bud.